Hey y'all, I'm Lauren and welcome to Cantina Cast. Today I am talking about Triple Zero by Karen Travis. This is the second book in the Republic Commando series, which is a Legends series. There's a couple series that I'm slowly making my way through, and this is one of them. And shout out to everybody who recommended this series to me because it is definitely one of the all time greats. I also do think that if you're considering trying out Legends and you don't know where to start, the Republic Commando series, in my opinion, is a great way to start if you like the prequels. You're dealing with totally new characters. There's a couple familiar faces, I guess, that are kind of cameos or kind of mentioned, but it's mostly new characters. It takes place during the Clone War, so you're familiar with kind of the general what's going on, but you're meeting new characters. And this is a series that's pretty self contained, so it's not like if you read this series, you're committing to, I think, 5 books, not like 20. To me, that's a great Legends place to start if you're considering it. The first book is called Hard Contact. I did a video about Hard Contact a while back, and I absolutely loved it. I loved Karen Travis's writing in that book. And book 2 was also very, very good. So I'm thinking this is looking like it's gonna be a solid series. Something I love about Karen Travis is that the way that she writes the clones is so insightful. I mean, of course, we see clones a lot in Star Wars. I mean, that's an understatement. They're one of the main parts, but the way that she really gets down into how they are affected by the war, their surroundings, their origins, the way that she shows all of that is really, really special. She actually shows you those small moments that really illustrate it and really drive it home that the clones really have a huge burden to carry. She really gets that point across in a way that I personally haven't come across anywhere else. Also, based on what I've read so far of this series, it feels like it might have been some of the inspiration for The Bad Batch. So if you really enjoy that TV show, then there's a good chance that you're going to like this series. Today I am talking about book 2. So there's a good chance if you haven't read book 1, you're going to have no idea what I'm talking about. But to give you sort of like a general idea of the main things that this book gets into, we deal a lot with the power dynamics between the clones and the Jedi. What is appropriate between those two groups? Because the Jedi have power over the clones in kind of a weird way. So, how should those two groups relate to each other? How should the Jedi deal with the clones? How should the clones deal with the Jedi? Also, the clones in this book are exposed a lot to just regular people. And for this particular group of clones, the Omega Squad that we're following in this series, this is their first time being exposed to people that are not also in the military. So it's pretty much a culture shock. And they have a lot of emotions about why don't I get to have this kind of a life? And that's something that a lot of them have to dig into and really deal with in a difficult way. Something else we get into in this book from the Jedi side, because of course we are picking up with Etain, who is one of the main characters from Hard Contact, the first book of this series. One thing that she's really dealing with in this book is the difference between the light side and the dark side. Is it really as cut and dry as she thought it was? Well, it turns out it's a little bit more complicated than that. So that's something she really has to wrestle with in this book. And the way that Karen Travis handles all of those themes, I just really loved. Her writing, first of all, I couldn't put the book down. It really sucked me in. And it's very easy to get invested in these characters. So that was a huge plus. Also, I kind of already mentioned this, but the way that she illustrates these concepts in little moments, that is one of my favorite things is when an author does that really well. So that was something that was a huge highlight for me in this book. And also the way that she builds character, even characters that we don't really spend a whole ton of time with. She really does a great job of showing us who that person is quickly without just like telling it to us all up front in a boring way. Like, again, it's in those small moments and with a little bit of background context at times, but she very quickly can show us who someone is. When she reveals something about that person later on, a lot of times, while it may be a surprise, you can kind of be like, oh, yeah, that makes sense for this person. So, if any of that sounds interesting to you, I really recommend picking up this series. Even if you haven't really read a whole lot of Legends, don't even worry about it. I feel like regardless, this series is easy to get into. If you're familiar with the Clone War, you kind of know the general ins and outs of what's going on with that. These are all new characters anyway, so it's not like you have a whole bunch you have to keep track of or know the context of. Really, the main context is just this is the Clone War, and these are the characters that we're following through that. Something else, too, that I appreciated is that it was a long time before I was able to get to book 2 just because of other Star Wars new releases, which, not a bad problem to have, but I was a little worried going into this. I was like, "Did I wait too long in between book 1 and book 2? Am I gonna be able to remember these people or remember what's going on?" But yes, it was totally fine. Karen Travis did a really good job of reminding me the key points from book 1 that I needed to know, also getting me caught back up with the characters and kind of showing like where they all are at now at the beginning of the book. So it didn't really feel like I was just being like thrown into something that I couldn't remember anything about the first book. So thankfully, even though more time passed for me to get to book 2 than I would have liked, it ended up being fine. I am going to talk about the general plot of this book now. So if you have not read it yet, or if you haven't read book 1, and you don't want any spoilers, now is your time to turn back. The way that this book opens is we do finally get some background on Skirata, who was one of the characters that was mentioned a lot in book 1, who we could tell that the clones really respected a lot, but we never really got to meet him in person or spend a lot of time with him. So I was really thankful that this book opened right up with that. And thankfully, Skirata was one of the main characters of this book, and it seems like we're going to spend a lot more time with him in the future. So I'm really excited about that. And we see how he feels very protective of the clones. We see how he got involved with the clones and how he really feels like he is their father. He's their officer, but really has a love for them that is very special and goes way far beyond that. He also understands the clones in a way that pretty much nobody else does, not even Etain. Something that we deal with a lot is that Etain feels like she gets the clones. She has so much empathy for them. Her heart is breaking for them constantly. She wants the best for them. She cares about them so much. She feels like she gets it. But what we see in this book is that she doesn't really fully get it. And there's a couple mistakes that she makes in this book that illustrate that. While she does care about them deeply, that's never in question. She cares about them, especially Darman. That's all still totally the case. But she makes a couple of mistakes in the way that she deals with the clones that show that she doesn't really fully understand everything that they have to go through, and Skirata confronts her about that. But when we pick up with Etain in this book, while she's still lacking in some areas, she does seem like she has way more of the hang of being an officer in the Clone War, how to actually command her men, how to deal with them. She has a lot more confidence at the start of this book than she did at the start of the last book because of all the growth that she went through in book 1. So in book 2, it's clear to see that she is a different person now. She also misses Darman a ton and the Omega Squad as a whole. And she is reunited with them in this book pretty early on, where Omega Squad, they end up having an issue with one of the missions that they were on. So Etain's current squad has to go and extract them from their crashed ship. So they do end up crossing paths again, and they do end up on the same mission for the rest of this book. What they end up doing together is there are separatist terrorists on Coruscant that are causing problems. And it seems like there's probably a lot of them that have infiltrated just regular life on Coruscant, and so they have to find them and remove them. Skirata, Omega Squad, Etain, and also we meet some new characters on this mission too. We meet Jusik, who is another Jedi, and then we also meet Ordo, who is one of Skirata's Arc Null troopers, which is a different type of trooper. This is the part that reminded me a lot of the Bad Batch is they really like do their own thing. Like they do not really have the obedience part ingrained into their heads like the other clones do. So Ordo is kind of a loose cannon at times, and the only person that he will take orders from is Skirata, and that's it. So he's a really cool character. And they end up having to stay on Coruscant and do this sort of covert black ops mission that word of it cannot get out. So they do have to keep it on the down low. They have to use a lot of different tactics than what they're used to because not only do they need to keep it on the down low, but there's also a ton of civilians around. This is a complicated situation that they all find themselves in. Through this situation, they all end up doing things that a lot of them wouldn't have pictured themselves doing. Like Skirata has to make a lot of arrangements under the table. Attain at one point has to torture somebody, which of course is not the Jedi way. Jusik a lot of times has to make decisions that also contradict what the Jedi way technically is. And then the clones also have to go about things like completely different tactics. They're all in an environment that they're not familiar with. They're all doing things that make them uncomfortable and having to make peace with those things. That whole situation, especially of when Attain has to torture the prisoner and also just the other people that she's around now, such as Skirata, this is what leads to her questioning the whole light versus dark thing. Key example of this for her is that Skirata is full of anger and passion and what seem to be dark side emotions, but those emotions are for the clones. They're not self-serving. They're in protection of the clones that he loves and is very attached to. And so that makes her kind of be like, okay, he feels like the dark side sometimes, but is he really actually of the dark side? That leads her down a road of trying to make sense of all that. Something that happens with this book that is like kind of crazy is so Etain and Darman, they profess their love to each other. That part's not really crazy. We saw that coming since book one. They develop a relationship. They're spending a lot of time together. The crazy part is that Etain gets pregnant on purpose without telling Darman. And the way that she sees this is she feels like she's giving him a gift, the gift of being a father, because he longs for a normal life, just like so many of the clones do that are part of this mission. They're seeing all these civilians on Coruscant having normal lives that they don't get to have. They're longing for that. They're probably never going to get it because even if the war was over, they're not going to live very long. So Etain is like, I'm going to give him the gift of giving a father. He's going to love this. He's going to absolutely love it. And like before this point, I really loved Etain as a character. But when she started talking like this in her head, because of course she hasn't told Darman yet, but when she started talking like this, I was like, she is losing me. She's totally losing me. I was like, what is she doing? This is insane. Like, I don't know how she thought this was a good idea. What is he going to do? First of all, he's like required to fight this war. Even if the war is over, he's gonna die soon, like of old age, which is insane. This is just such a bad idea. I don't even have to explain that to you. It's very obvious why this is a bad idea. And the fact that she's a Jedi. And so she's gonna have to like admit it to the Jedi Order that she's having a baby, and the Jedi Order is gonna be like, "Excuse me?" Like, it's just a horrible idea. But she does this, feels pretty good about it for like a pretty good portion of the book, and is just secretly pregnant. And eventually, towards the end of the book, she admits it to Skirata and is like, I haven't told Darman yet because I don't want him to be distracted during this mission. And Skirata is like, are you insane? And Skirata gives her such a good lecture. I was like, thank you so much because I had been waiting for that. So I was really glad that Skirata told her exactly what I had been wanting to say this whole time. And this is when he's like, you think you understand him, but clearly you don't. Because the main thing that he doesn't have in his life is choice. And you also didn't give him a choice in this. And Skirata gets so angry and is like, you cannot just do this to him, that he sends her to Kilara to have the baby there. And Kilara is the planet from book one that the pretty much most of book one took place on that planet. So he just like sends her to like the middle of nowhere to like go have this baby. Tell Darman later, like after they figure out what the heck they're gonna do in this situation. So it sounds like book three is probably gonna be getting into that. But man, that was so satisfying. And it sucks because like I loved Attain up until this point. And maybe by book three, maybe she'll win me over again. But what ends up happening with the separatist terrorists, which this is another crazy part of this book, which I feel like I should have seen coming from a mile away, but it still surprised me, was it turns out that a huge part of what was giving the separatists information to actually be able to do the damage that they were doing on Coruscant is that the Gurlinins from book one, this is the shape-shifting species of people that lived on Kilara. They were angry at the Republic because the Republic did not uphold their end of the bargain from book one. There was an agreement between the Republic and the Gurlinins that if the Gurlinins helped the Republic on Kilara, then the Republic would remove all the separatists and leave the Gurlinins in peace. The Republic did not uphold their end of the deal. They basically got the separatists out of there, and then the Republic brought in all their warships and turned Kilara into a mess. So the Gurlinins were angry, and understandably so. And Jennart, who was one of the main characters from the first book, it turned out that she was involved in what was feeding information to the separatists on Coruscant as a way to try to destabilize the Republic. So all of that ends up coming out through this mission because at one point the clones capture Jennart, not knowing who it is because Jennart is a shapeshifter. And so during that process, all of this information comes out. They have to quick hurry up and like kind of make an agreement that, okay, fine. Like if you give us information about what the separatists are doing here, then we will withdraw from Kilara. Hopefully the Republic actually sticks to the agreement this time. I'm thinking that hopefully we will see how that ends up turning out in book three. But the consequences of them not upholding the agreement from book one definitely bit them in the butt this time. I'm really also hoping that in book three, we get to spend more time with Jusik, the other Jedi character that we meet in this book. He also, based on his experiences in this mission, he interprets his duty as a Jedi very differently. But unlike Etain, he's not really considering leaving the order. Like, there's a few times in this book where Etain is telling herself that she's going to leave the order. Jusik isn't quite like that. He's more like interpreting the teachings differently. Now, I could be proven wrong in later books. It might not stay that way. But in this particular book, his opinion is, I'm gonna remain attached because my heart tells me that it is right because of the love that he feels for the people around him. I mean, there's even one point in this book where he's fighting and wearing Mandalorian armor, which was a cool visual illustration of these two worlds coming together for him. So I'm hoping that in later books we get to see where this character ends up in terms of reconciling his Jedi self with the self that has witnessed all of these things taking place outside of the Jedi Order that have also impacted him. Something else I'm also thinking we're going to see in later books is when Etain has the child, Skirata is going to, it sounds like based on what he was saying to her, take on a pretty strong role with the child and bringing the child up in the Mandalorian way. When that actually happens, there's probably going to be some tension because I don't know if Etain is going to agree with that. In this scene where this discussion is happening, she's kind of just going with what Skirata says because she's embarrassed and like mortified that she thought that this was a good idea to do. I'm wondering if she's going to change her mind later. I don't know. We're going to have to see where that goes. So I'm hoping that later books get into that issue. This is my first time reading this series, and this series has been out for a very long time. So some of my predictions may be like completely wrong. And if you've read the series, then you'll know that. So take what I'm saying with a grain of salt. This is my first time reading this series. But yeah, definitely am fully invested now. I'm excited to read the next book in this series. Hopefully it will not take me as long to get to book three. Let me know if you've read this series, what you thought of it. If it's one of your favorites, let me know in the comments. I feel like this series is so many people's favorite, and understandably so. The first two books were fantastic, and I'm excited to get to the rest of the books. So thanks so much for joining me, y'all. I hope that y'all have a great rest of your day. Bye, guys.